At some point in life, each of us has to find our way. Only sometimes it's easier said than done. Picture with me, if you will, a couple. Let's just say, I don't know, they've been married 17 years, have 3 children, girl, boy, girl, and live somewhere in upstate New York. Call it Rochester, maybe Brighton to be specific. You don't know them. They both live busy lives. She is a dynamo of human interaction, the director of wellness for a school for young women, vibrant and vivacious and vital by all accounts. He as a cleric who disappoints people at a rate they can handle. Now, for most outsiders, they would see this as a strange couple, a perennial Beauty and the Beast, classic Beauty and the Beast sort of view here, but there is at least one thing that brings them in common, one thing that they share, that is that each morning, this purely hypothetical couple each enjoys a morning run. Not together, at least not usually. A speed differential somewhat precludes that possibility. But all things being equal, they both prefer to get a running start to their day. Only they approach it very differently. See, she, faster and freer, leaves the house and in that very moment decides which direction she will go. Sure, she has some routes that she likes to take, but she feels very free to change it up as the Spirit moves her in the moment. Whereas he, slower in more ways than one, runs the exact same route every single morning. Oh, he could change it up, go in a different direction, take the path less traveled, so to speak. But for whatever reason, he doesn't. No, at some point he found this particular path and stuck with it. Which is better? It's hard to say. After all, this is only a run, and this is only a hypothetical couple. But we do recognize the situation, don't we? After all, life is a little like that. At some point in life, each of us has to find our way, only sometimes it's easier said than done. Now, some of us sort of default into the way we're going to follow. We survive the birth canal and stay on the same trajectory from first breath to last. Others of us, though, change direction so many times we couldn't find our way back to start with a map. And both ways have their challenges, don't they? And whether we ought to be on a different path or keep following the way we're on is somewhat determined by the path we happen to find ourselves on right at this particular moment. The truth is, some of us likely need a change, and some of us need to stay the same. And therein lies that daily existential dilemma. At every moment of every day, each of us is faced with a choice of which way we will go. On our hardest days, of course, it makes us look at that God-given gift of free will as sort of like a curse. It would be a lot easier if it was just planned out for us, if we didn't have to think about it, if it was predestined, preordained, maybe Calvin was onto something. But then again, that's not how life works. No, whether we like it or not, friends, each of us, for better or worse, has to make a choice. Each of us has to find our way. And not just in the little things like which running route we will take this morning, but in the big things as well. like which direction our life will ultimately face. Maybe some of us are facing that choice today. We've come to the right place, so to speak. After all, that's kind of why we're here or there, but you get the point. That's why we come to church. It's so easy to get caught up in the trappings of religion, the dogma and doctrine, the detritus of faith. We start to lose track of the fact that faith at its core is not about long creeds or complex theological understandings. No, in the end, our faith is really about one thing, and one thing only: life. It's about what it means to really live. The whole reason someone like me stands in a place like this and speaks for admittedly too long is because we're trying to get across a way of life, the way to life. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. However imperfectly, we are here as a church to keep reminding each other of the way to life. Like the Mandalorian, we're here to keep reminding each other this is the way, lest we get lost. We do remember the way, don't we? Before Christianity was a full-fledged religion, when it was still just a break-off sect of Judaism in that first century, the people who saw those disciples of Christ called them followers of the way. They were simply those who followed the way. In some ways, it says it a lot better than Christianity, because the truth is, we can't follow Jesus Christ if we don't follow the way of life he taught us. That is what this is all about, and it's not a secret. Teacher, what's the greatest commandment? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, friends, if one wants to be a person of faith, one needs do only one thing: choose love. Only it's easier said than done, isn't it? It'd be nice if there were just two choices always laid out before us, clearly labeled, the way of love, not the way of love. Then we could know exactly which way to go, but that's not the way life works. No, it's complex, isn't it? There are always multiple choices, and we can't always suss out the way to love simply by looking. Wheaties or Cheerios, we don't know which is the way of love. In other words, friends, we don't always not choose the way out of love simply out of spite. Sometimes we just kind of fall into it. Like that modern prophet Taylor Swift says, it's not love, it's not hate, it's just indifference. The challenge, of course, is that the longer we head down that path of indifference, the harder it is to find our way. The easier it is to get lost, to stop hearing those cries out in the wilderness. And at some point along the path, we have to either stop and turn around, or resign ourselves to staying lost. Surely this year has reminded us of that, hasn't it? No one could have predicted everything that we'd have to face in this last year, from the shutdowns to the quarantines to the social distancing to the lost opportunities with family and friends. This year has turned almost everything on its head. The world's turned upside down. So many of us have had to change our routines. We've had the way that we normally take blocked. We've had to change it up. Now, some have had to run even harder to keep up, and others of us have had to figure out what to do with some different things on our hands, like time. But we've all had to face something new. And sometimes it's only when we face that difference of routine, sometimes when we change it up, that we suddenly recognize some things. It's no wonder, of course, that we have started to recognize the challenges of racial injustice. The truth is, they've been there for 400 years. But somehow in pausing, we were able to see them in a new way. Now, maybe you were out there as one of the lucky ones on that happy, healthy, wholesome path, not needing to make any adjustments in your life to find that full way of love, and in so doing, find the way of life. But there were others of us who were so busy going from one thing to the next, one event to the next, checking off one item to the next, that we forgot why we were doing it in the first place. We forced it upon our kids, filling up their calendars every moment of every day from sun up to sundown, teaching them at least implicitly that the greatest sin in this life is somehow pausing, letting someone else get ahead, not keeping up. When the truth is, none of us can. Not always. And we can fill our lives with empty things and find ourselves lost. It's hard to choose the more loving way when we're late to soccer practice. Though so much has started back up in the last few months, maybe we ought not to head right back into it before we've really learned the lesson of the moment, before we've allowed it to make us reflect on how we've been living and whether it is the right way. What might that look like for you? The good news of our faith is that if, upon discovering we're not heading in the right direction, we can always make a change. We can hear it in our gospel lesson for today. It comes from the gospel according to Mark, which is the very first gospel, not the first one in our Bibles, but the first one written 40 years or so after Jesus walked the earth. It was when they were still trying to figure out how to live out that way. It's the simplest gospel, the shortest gospel. There's no birth narrative, and in the first draft, not even account of the resurrection. It is only and fully about the way of life Jesus the Christ taught us. And it starts by reminding us that that way had been coming through Isaiah, prepare the way of the Lord, make his paths straight, and then heads fully into showing us what it looks like. Only it doesn't start with Jesus, it starts with John the Baptist, a strange man who wore camel's hair clothing and ate locusts and wild honey. Gross! Honey? No. He did something more important, though, which was he spent his entire life finding those people lost in the wilderness and showing them the way. What would it look like if we committed to the same thing, friends? John the Baptist proclaimed a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. He proclaimed repentance that literally means to turn in another direction, to turn around, to turn. What would it mean if we found those lost people in this world, starting with the one we see in our mirrors, and proclaimed a baptism of repentance, that it is indeed possible wherever we find ourselves in life, whatever path we're on, no matter how lost we think we are, to turn in another way, to find the way of love again. Friends, that is what it means to be a part of the church. That's what the new members today committed to. That is who we are. We are the people who walk alongside one another and keep reminding each other, this is the way. That is what this season is about. Advent is not about preparing for the coming of Christ. That already happened. This is about preparing for that promised world that he came to tell us about. It's about preparing our hearts and our minds for the way of Christ, for that world in which we all finally and fully live the way he taught us. Sure, some of us will come away from this still running the same proverbial running route each and every morning. But the promise of the gospel, the promise of our faith, is that there is another way. We just have to choose it, moment by moment, hour by hour, day by day. And until we all can do that, friends, then our job is to keep walking alongside one another and reminding each other, this is the way. This is the way. This is the way. May it be so. Amen.